F9 Audio is proud to present the F9 Grid Trilogy for Logic Pro X. Running from an 8GB core library of multi-sampled instruments and drum sounds created using original 80s hardware, this release contains more than 260 patches that plug directly into Logic's library. This release contains 7 Logic projects, running Midi and the multi-sampled instruments from this release, and will illuminate all areas of this pack, as well as giving you amazing starting points for your own original productions. Also included are a whole collection of startup pages, preloaded with the sounds of the Grid Trilogy so you don't have to break your flow whilst you're creating. Deluxe customers will also get 493 Apple loops from Grid Volume 1 and the entire 8 Drumtrax Logic sessions from Grid V3, bringing the total content for Deluxe customers up to a staggering 12.5 gigabytes and more than 25 Logic projects. We truly hope you will love this release just as much as we enjoyed making it. So let's dive straight in and take a closer look at some of this content. Hi everyone, James here from F9 Audio and the Freemasons, and welcome to the Grid Trilogy for Logic Pro X. I am personally incredibly proud of the way this has turned out, and we've got some real treats for Logic users in this release. For example, a full set of macro controls on each and every patch. But I think for now, the best thing for me to do to start is to play you a few snippets of the included projects so you can really get a feel for this material in action. This is the first, it's the Daytona Nights project and is built entirely on the Grid Trilogy sound library, playing back MIDI data. Now for me, this is a perfect example of the weight and swagger of this release, and it's all down to the bespoke instruments that we've created here. For example, the 80s snare drum designer. That is actually a very clever patch that will allow you to create a whole range of different snare drum tones, but more on that later. Here's just one of the 43 included bass patches. Some beautiful plucks. And some fat old 80s pads. All direct from 80s original hardware. I just now want to quickly play you a slightly edited version of the prequel project. Now, if you're new to F9, this is what sets us apart from the other sample labels. With these kind of releases, we can supply fully playable and editable instruments and MIDI parts. Now, this is way more flexible and far more powerful than supplying you static loops. Also, the 7 included demo projects will teach you so much about producing with this library and how these sounds can be combined, layered, and processed. Now, I think without doubt, this is our most powerful Logic implementation to date, and we're taking advantage of all of Logic Pro X's best functionality. For example, the 16 drum kits within the library use the Logic Drum Machine Designer that allows for fine-tuning of the individual sounds, as well as an overall set of macro controls for the entire kit. Here's the Cruise kit in action with some automation of the smart controls applied. The 43 bass patches in this collection have just the right amount of smart controls to add carefully controlled overdrive, as well as legato and two-voice unison switching. Here's the OBX Holiday bass patch in action. Many of the analog source patches like this one take advantage of the ESX24's round-robin functions that will play back a rotating sample set. That really helps us to keep the analog spirit of the original sounds alive. Now, if you want to know just how far we're prepared to go to get a sound like this, we'll show you. So to sample this patch, we took an Oberheim OBXA and put it in unison mode. That stacks all of the voices on one particular note. But sometimes that can be too overpowering. So we opened the lid, disabled 4 of the voices, and then panned the voices that were turned on around in the stereo image using these pan pot controls. Now, because all of the voice cards are made from either discrete components or CEM chips, everything's aged at slightly different rates, so you get this wonderful width between the voices. And that's what made this particular bass patch really jump out. Whilst we're on the subject of going to extremes to get a sound, let me quickly play you this beat we've made up using a particular set of the Grid Trilogy drum library, the EPROM drum menus. I'm sure you can hear the grit and power of those sounds, and these are pretty much straight out of the box with just a little bit of master fader tickling. Now, they sound so solid because of a brand new and unique workflow we created for this pack. This is the Oberheim DX. It is the sister drum machine of the wildly successful Oberheim DMX, and as you can see, it's got this fantastic blue striped 80s livery, same as all of the Oberheim devices from that era. It sounds like this. Now, the reason we've used the DX over the Oberheim DMX is internally, if I open this up, you can see the EPROM chips here. So here we go, kick, snare, hat. There's not actually one in the tom circuit at the moment, and this dual slot is ready for a 707 clap and rim. Now, if any of you out there are already familiar with the Oberheim DX and DMX sounds, you will have already heard that these are not the actual stock sounds of this drum machine. That's because we've been burning custom EPROM chips to play back inside this device, and we've picked the DX because it will play back chips that are twice the storage length of the chips used inside the DMX. So how did we do this? Well, we found a little PC application that could turn 8-bit WAV files into EPROM bin files that we could then burn onto our own chips. This gave us an absolutely unique workflow. We were designing drums inside of modern DAWs, transferring them to this ancient 8-bit format, and then playing them back through the voice circuits of an original 80s drum machine. We also picked the DX because it has tuning knobs on the back. So it allows us to get a fantastic range of tones out of this one box. Each patch from the library will come with a plug-in chain already set up. Some of the smart macro controls will alter several parameters within the chains at once, as you can see from this low control macro. At the center position, it doesn't really do much, but turn it to the right and it will add a low-end shelf, roll off some sub, as well as dipping the muddy frequencies slightly. Turn it to the left of center and it will employ the high-pass filter, removing bass from the sound. Now, we found these controls really handy whilst we were putting the demo projects together to actually get everything to fit together really quickly. Also, with the reverb and delay controls, turning the macro to its lowest position will actually turn the plugin off, saving system resources. We've even left holes in the plugin chains at strategic points so you can add your favorite plugins. Here I'm using Brainworks' excellent SSL E-channel as a channel strip for this particular patch. Obviously, in the 80s, arpeggiators were everywhere, and we've used Logic's inbuilt arpeggiators to great effect on a number of the patches. Here's an excellent 3-octave example on a bass patch. And you can really hear the round robins working there. There's a nice authentic movement in the sound. Okay, let's add some more. Here's a 32nd division arpeggio that's great for when you hold down chords. This slightly slower arpeggio that's just twinkling away in the background. And we've got one thicker arpeggio that I'm going to throw some filtered EQ moves onto. And one just over the top, I'm going to call it Anthem. We've even arpeggiated things like shakers and tambourine sounds. So giving you instant patterns to play on their respective sound menus. Let's open them all up and have a listen. Also, I actually just pulled these sounds straight out of the patch library. I haven't really had to alter anything. We've just leveled them a little bit. So it will give you an idea of the quality of the sonics. Okay, so we're getting a real feel for this now. Let's see how easy it is to put a quick track idea together. So I pulled up the Beverly Hills startup page and dug straight into the drums using the kick designer and the EPROM snares, claps and hats to create the principal sounds. Added some auto shaker and some tambourine parts for later on. I then added another layer of snare tones with the grid snare designer and a percussion part that I liked from the cruise kit that we pulled up earlier. Added some cymbals and little layered clap and snare frills to give the drum some movement as it moves through the bars. Then did a bit of processing to bring it all together, coloured it all light blue obviously and sorted the balance out. Now we have this. Okay, so to that, let's add a nice arpeggiated bass. I'm going to use one of the bubblier presets and we're going to go from A, down to G, up to D, and back down to F. Let's just whack it in. Okay, so let's just copy that across the whole piece for the minute, and I'm going to stick a flanger on it nice and slow. I've actually got Logic's flanger set up to do that by default. Now let's add some pads. And this wonderful pluck sound. Okay, now let's give it a nice central solid core with this bass sound. So I've just added a couple more sounds. I've doubled up this pluck sound right at the end. Added some Juno chords with this fat scramble patch. Added a low note with an SQ80 Rhodes patch. And what's great about the early hybrid digital synths is when you go into the lower registers, they sound fantastic, and there's plenty of patches that you'll hear all over the audio demos that are using that sonic signature. One of my most favourite patches in the whole thing is the Top Gun bass, one of the classic DX7 sounds. And in this case, we're just using it as tiny little staccato pickups. You'll hear it as we play through in a minute. The last sound is just this big fat fifth lead that's just helping out at the front and adding a little bit of rhythmical interest later on. So here it is, my little homage to one of the most haunting melodies to ever come out of the 80s. It's Bronski Beat's Small Town Boy. Now, obviously, we've been a little bit overly creative with the editing there, but it will just show you how quickly these sounds can come together. And it was quite natural. I found the sounds, they were on the page, they worked. I just kind of moved them into position and got everything leveled. They do work incredibly well, and they are all designed to work together as an ensemble. Just one more thing before we wrap this walkthrough video up. You've heard me mention the drum designers several times, and we have a few of these special little patches within the pack. But before I show you what they are, I thought I'd show you them directly in action. Let me just play you this simple beat we've built. Now, as you can hear, the snares and claps are changing subtly throughout the bar, but still keeping a really solid feeling. Now, if we just solo the snare, you'll hear exactly what I mean. You'll hear the difference in snare tone between the different hits. Now, it's actually using all of the same solid chord. This sound is on every snare drum hit, but we are adding differing layers. Let me show you exactly how this is happening. This is a multi-layered approach to drum design, and the original concept came about in Grid V1. So basically we split a MIDI keyboard up into a series of octaves, and we have different types of sounds across the different octaves. So for example here, in octave 1 we have the core sound set. A selection of fairly different tones. Then we've got an octave of non-linear reverbs that you can combine in any manner. Then we've got some digital grit samples. And some long reverberant samples at the top. So you can combine these in many different ways. So now you've got the basic idea, have another listen to our quick beat. So now let's have a look at the MIDI on the clap part, and you'll see multiple hits are being used at once. I'm going to solo it and we'll have a look at what's going on. So we've got two main core samples, and then some reverbs, different selections of them, as well as some of the bite samples or the digital crush samples being used on top. But the combinations of them playing different notes like this will result in those incredibly subtle but really important movements within the sound. Now the great thing is about this, it just kind of encourages you to just whack your keyboard and try different combinations of notes to see what you can actually find. Now of course this is also controlled by macros, and for each of the actual sound sets, for example the core sounds, we have a pitch control and a volume control. And that's the same for the reverbs. Let's just turn them up so we can hear them. The digital crush. And the long reverbs on this particular patch, which are actually not used at the moment. So that means a great deal of fine-tuning can be done to the individual sound to make it really fit in with your track. And sometimes in contemporary drum programming, those extra bits of tonality control are all important. Now, also, don't forget that you can at any point twirl down and have access to the ESX24 that are actually driving this. So here you can see them labelled on the left-hand side. You've got the core drum sounds. So let's say we wanted to tighten the actual envelope on those drum sounds up. We can just open this ESX24, bring the decay of that down. So under the hood, you've got even more control over these sounds. So for us, it's the beginning of a great new concept in drum design, this kind of layered approach, and it allows you pretty much to build an almost unlimited amount of tones out of a simple selection of patches. So that's it for this video, and thank you so much for watching this walkthrough of the F9 Grid Trilogy for Logic Pro X, another of our advanced F9 instrument releases. And just as a passing shot, the extras folder in the main pack contains some Space Designer presets for the included collection of impulse responses, all taken from original 80s reverb units, as well as some of the handy arpeggiator presets you've seen today. We know from our customer feedback just how powerful the F9 instruments are in use. As one user said to us just recently, "I don't know what you're doing to these sounds or what special sauce you're using, but I just keep coming back to them again and again." And that's all we can ask for, really, because it's all we want to do is get the very best sounds out there for the production community. We're wishing you all the best from Brighton in your musical productions this year, and we'll see you next time.